know, we're always open to the public. I'm gonna start us off actually, and maybe I just will redo the intro with the translation. I'll get us to our language justice statement.
Great, thanks so much, Hilda.
Thank you all so much. Good evening, everybody. My name is B. Torres. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm here with the Community Language Cooperative, along with my colleague, Liz Torres, and we will be your Spanish interpreters this evening. I want to thank each of you for your commitment to language justice, which means that all people have the right to speak and be heard in the language of their hearts. Therefore, my colleague Liz and I will be providing simultaneous interpretation during today's meeting in English and in Spanish. Once I finish speaking, we will activate that interpretation function, and at that time, at the bottom of your Zoom screen next to your apps button, you will see a globe icon. Please click on that icon and select either English or Spanish as the language of your heart. If you are fully bilingual in both English and Spanish, there's no need to select a language. Please remember to speak at a conversational pace so that we are able to provide an accurate rendition of your message. Thank you so much. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Vi Torres, mi pronombre es ella y estoy aquí con mi colega Liz Torres y estamos aquí con la Cooperativa Comunitaria del Lenguaje. Y les agradecemos muchísimo su compromiso a la justicia del lenguaje, lo cual significa que todas las personas tienen el derecho de hablar y ser escuchadas en el idioma de su corazón. Entonces, Liz y yo vamos a proporcionar interpretación simultánea para esta reunión. En cuanto termine de hablar, activaremos esa función de interpretación y en ese momento, en la parte inferior de su pantalla de Zoom, al lado de su botón de reacciones, usted va a ver un icono de globo terráqueo. Favor de hacer clic en ese icono y elija su idioma de corazón, sea inglés o el español. Si usted es completamente bilingüe en ambos idiomas, no es necesario elegir uno. Les recuerdo que por favor hablen a un ritmo de conversación para poder brindar una interpretación precisa de su mensaje. Muchas gracias. Ya comenzaremos y activaremos la interpretación. Thank you very much. We can go ahead and activate that interpretation function now.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And maybe I'll repeat my same at the beginning. Welcome, everybody. We are on our 7th subcommittee meeting for the best practices of community engagement. We have gotten feedback from task force members from the community, done focus groups, talked to individual members of the community, and really excited to get you guys and the task force members to talk a little bit about some of the recommendations that we have and on our plate. Before we get started, I would like to get us on our land acknowledgement. Usually I do it in English. I'm going to do it in Spanish today. ¿Por qué reconocemos la tierra? Reconocer la tierra es una expresión de gratitud y aprecio a aquellos en cuyo territorio resides. Es una forma de honrar a aquellos pueblos indígenas que han estado viviendo, trabajando en la tierra desde tiempos inmemoriales. Es importante comprender la larga historia que los ha llevado a residir en la tierra y tratar de comprender su lugar dentro de esa historia. Los reconocimientos de la tierra no existen en un tiempo en pasado o en un contexto histórico. El colonialismo es un proceso actual y en curso. Y necesitamos construir nuestra conciencia y nuestra participación en el presente. También vale la pena señalar que el reconocimiento de la tierra es un protocolo indígena. Nos gustaría reconocer que la tierra en la que vivimos, trabajamos, aprendemos y comulgamos es la patria original de muchas naciones tribales. Reconocemos la dolorosa historia de genocidio y la expulsión forzosa de este territorio y honramos y respetamos a los diversos pueblos indígenas que todavía están conectados a esta tierra en la que nos reunimos. Si tienen alguna pregunta de qué tierra nos están comunicando con nosotros, pueden chequear este link acá. So kind of just wanted to change it up. Normally I do language in English, but wanted to maybe also utilize also our translation that is so important to have present, and for folks to also feel what it is to receive on the other end of the dominant language also in a space like this. So, well, that takes us into our next item. I'm sorry if I'm looking this way, I have my second screen. So let's do a roll call and then we'll get into a quick icebreaker. So our subcommittee task force members, I have noted that Dominic Gomez will be absent and she let us know. but I see Jaime Valdez.
Presente.
Welcome. Kimberly Mendoza, cook. I don't think I see her. Maybe she'll be joining us in a little bit. Mara Browsey Wigshar. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. I think she's present. Marsha Nelson.
Here.
Welcome. And Jonathan Asher.
Present.
Welcome in. And I want to recognize that we have a couple other EJ Task Force members present. I see Rene Chacon. Who else do we have? I think that's about everybody right now. But welcome, folks. As our quick icebreaker, you're all welcome to participate. Oh, and also Elizabeth, sorry, my apologies. I see you there. My bad. Welcome in. So as we're talking a little bit about, and wanted to bring us into a space of maybe abundance. As we're talking into space, summer is almost ending. So please, if you want to share an activity or an event that brought you joy in this summer, and how do you hear about it? Anybody wants to get started?
I'll go real quick for you, Ilda.
Thank you, Morgan.
I got you. I was unfortunately out of town for this one, but one of my favorite events every summer is the Dragon Boat Festival out here in Lakewood. It takes place at Sloan's Lake, and it's a celebration of Asian heritage and culture, which is very prevalent in Denver. Also a community that I'm very involved in, and I think it's a wonderful celebration of past practices and the current folks who live and work here in Denver. So that's always one of my favorite events of the summer. You get to watch the dragon boat races on the lake and enjoy great music and good food. So that's always one of my favorites.
Thank you, Morgan. Want to kick it to anybody wants to go next? I won't kick it to people because I don't want to go and tell you, I guess. Maybe I can go ahead and share mine. City Park Jazz, it's a great experience. I love it. My mom and I usually meet up out there. She brings a blanket, bottle of wine, hang out, have some snacks, really enjoy the nice weather. And yeah, it's a great event. And to participate as a family, getting there earlier, you can do games in the lawn. And normally, I think I heard about it through like the neighborhood association. Anybody else wants to share summer event that you enjoyed or would like?
I'll go. So I don't like summer. Sorry. It's too hot and I'm actually allergic to the sun. So I cannot be in the sun for long periods of time. So there's nothing super exciting other than an occasional, I do enjoy visiting with my nieces, well, my goddaughters, I call them my nieces, and taking them out and just enjoying some ice cream over the weekends and doing small hikes wherever possible so that we're not in the sun too much. But just the ability to kind of be out sleeveless, but not too much, because again, I'm not a fan of the summer, sorry.
Thank you, Marsha, for sharing. Anybody else would like to join us in?
I'll go. I always put the summer solstice for Chupantla. Hello, loves. I think most of you know me. I'm Rene Chacon, also co-chair for the equity analysis with Beatriz Soto subcommittee. Sorry, I'm also on another call. I apologize. We do Chupantla in June, which is Father's Day weekend. So I'm going to say around the June 21st. And Chupantla is actually the summer solstice. It's one of the most beautiful ceremonies that I've seen growing up here in Colorado. If you're able to join, do join next year. It is open to the public to come see the ceremonies with lots of vendors and fun stuff too. Really good food. So Chupanla has always been a really fun ceremony. It also starts the day and a few days before. So we have sweat lodges and things leading up to. So it's just a time for community to get together and have that time for prayer and just enjoy the next season too, and also honor it for what it is too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Anybody else that would like to participate? Okay.
I'll just say
please go ahead.
I don't really have a specific, and I'm not. Hopefully, this shows my name on my thing. I can never tell if the Zoom on my phone, but this is Jonathan Asher, and I don't know that I have necessarily a specific event, but I guess an event that brought me joy this summer was just randomly running into one old friend in a town I used to live into that then precipitated to kind of turn into getting tons of texts from like everybody that I knew that used to live in that town. And I was just there on a work trip, quickly kind of passing through, but was able to go out and get dinner and drinks with just a ton of old friends. So that was a nice event in the kind of non-huge event way that you might be talking about, but that brought me a lot of joy, just catching up with old friends after a couple of years of not a lot of social interaction. So
awesome. Anybody else?
I'll mention one of my favorite summer activities. I do love the summer, by the way. It's actually the spring is my favorite time of year, but I like summer probably second best. But one of the things I like about summer is outdoor concerts and music festivals. And it's been a rough summer for me. It's been way too busy, but I have gotten to get to one really good concert in Denver Tech Center area at Fiddler's Green earlier this summer. I like reggae, and it was kind of a reggae rock, ska, punk rock concert with Slightly Stupid, Stick Figure, and 311, and so that was really fun. I'm hoping to get to some more later this summer, but yeah, I love music and live music especially.
Backstreet Boys are up in town today, Jamie. You got to make your way up here.
I was just having this conversation with some of my coworkers and saying all the good music that came from the 80s and 90s, and we're talking about Backstreet and NSYNC. Are you kidding me?
Come on, as a child growing up in the 90s, that was the thing. Boy bands for sure. Anybody else? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. Not to be cheesy, but just to highlight all the things that brought you joy were related to community, were related to sharing with people. And I think in so many instances, we think that community engagement leads to conflict, which in so many instances also leads to joy and to engaging and to creating a space of unity in so many aspects. So I don't know, I just wanted to elevate that for now. But moving into wanting to make sure that folks have reviewed the summary notes. Lovna or Natalie, do you mind putting them in the chat for our last meeting? If folks have any questions of where we're at or
yeah, it's actually up there. I just put it in a little bit ago.
Okay, thank you so much.
If people scroll up, I can put it in again here.
Perfect. No, thank you. Well, right now, I think we're going to be moving into our main item topic for today, which is looking our draft 2 recommendations for our subcommittee. And Lovna, I'm going to kick it to you to set us the stage and context.
Awesome. Thanks, Hilda. And I'm just going to drop a link in the chat as well. Sorry, I know a lot of links just went into the chat, but hopefully that one is well labeled. And I guess I'll start off by doing a bit of a screen share in just getting us grounded in what we are kind of coming here to discuss today. And Natalie and Joel, if there's at any point, there's anything that you would like to add, please just feel free to interject. So Give me one moment and I will screen share. Okay, awesome. So I think most of our task force members are pretty familiar with this document. This is draft 2 of the recommendations, and I say draft in a very drafty way because an official draft 2 will go out to the task force members prior to the August 25th meeting. So we are kind of building up onto draft 2. To be really clear about timeline and kind of where we are approaching our 5th meeting, which will be taking place on August 25th. We are going to be sending out more information about this, hopefully later this week. Morgan is working hard on kind of securing a venue for our meeting, but we are planning to have our next meeting in Grand Junction on the 25th. This would be an all-day meeting in person with the option to attend virtually. But we do encourage all of our task force members to attend in person. We know that for many of you, it is far, but because we want to ensure that we are reaching our communities on the Western Slope and kind of showing that we really place importance on their opinions and their EJ issues that they're facing in that part of the state, it would be really meaningful for community members to see all of our task force members there. And our EJ program staff will certainly be attending in person. So that said, this will be our second to last meeting in August, with the final meeting taking place in October, in which we are considering to do that meeting in Pueblo. More details to come on that. Regarding today's meeting and this document in particular, and I'll just kind of read through a bit about this about document section. This has changed slightly since draft 1. But this document does summarize the ideas of the task force members, ideas that you all have raised during some of the major meetings and some of the subcommittee meetings. And these recommendations are labeled as potential recommendations and have generally been raised by 1 or 2 of you. I think at this point, what we are trying to do is like really start to develop consensus around some of the recommendations that are being talked about in more detail. And so, one thing that will continue to remind you throughout this, throughout the next couple of hours is really prioritizing how we can make this document a little bit more digestible and more concise. And so we might want to look to how we can cut down some of the language in here. I'll just increase the zoom on here so it's easier to see. Again, this document is in the chat, so if folks just prefer to follow along on your own screen, feel free to do that. And I'll stop the screen share once I've gone through this summary. Again, the EJ program staff has really created this document. We've reviewed recordings and notes from prior meetings. Of course, this is the second draft. And once we kind of go through and establish what this subcommittee in particular wants for the best practices for community engagement section, those edits and revisions will be incorporated into a draft 2, which will go to all of the task force members for our full review on August 25th. This document is called a bike rack document. I don't know if this is going to be readily accessible to all of you because we are kind of working on this internally as an EJ program, as the EJ program staff. But what we are essentially doing is there's been, we've had a number of meetings, dozens and dozens of meetings that there's been a lot of ideas. And so we've actually kind of moved some of those ideas to what we're now calling the bike rack. Those ideas are kind of ideas that were like one-off ideas that maybe were mentioned once, but never revisited. Nobody's really talked about them again. This is not to say that those ideas are not important, but again, getting down to a final report of recommendations that goes to the governor, legislature, and CDPHE in November, that being the final goal, we do need to get to a place where we have a really digestible document that is not just bullet points and numerous ideas, but one that is kind of more in a narrative format, and one that is that there's consensus around, that is actually implementable. So I hope that makes sense to folks. And the document as of right now and how draft 2 will be continually organized is by kind of subcommittee groups and general topic areas, but then we do hope to move to a more narrative format. And as this says, at this stage in the process, we're really looking for additional detail around ideas that are already being discussed. New ideas can still be added, but it's unlikely at this stage that there's really enough time to flesh out those new ideas in sufficient detail for them to be incorporated into the final recommendations. So I think that covers it. Joel and Natalie, if you have anything else to add, happy to have you interject here. But yeah, so this is basically, this meeting is really to get us prepped for the August 25th meeting and get the draft 2 recommendations, especially for this section, to be really well fleshed out. So,
Lubna, if it's okay to jump in there, I would just add, though, the bike rack document we haven't completed yet because we're of course still reviewing the hundreds of public comments we received last month, which is wonderful. We will obviously have that document ready for the full task force to review in August. So it's not going to be hidden for you. It's just that we of course have to have the subcommittee meetings before we're fully ready. But if there's an idea that you're like, wait a second, we brought that up in a prior meeting and I thought it was really important, and you don't see it in this current draft, we probably misunderstood and might have moved it to the bike rack. But the whole purpose of maintaining a second document is really just that we want to have those things all documented, so that if you as task force members are like, actually, I really think we need to push this forward and add specificity to it and have more discussion, even if we haven't discussed it much, that will obviously be there. So please chime in if you're like, this was a really good idea and I don't see it in the document today. And of course, we'll have that completed document for you all in August, or on the 25th. It is, in fact, August today.
Yeah, and just to continue off of that statement, I do want to just kind of make note that during that 30-day public comment period, we received approximately 250 public comments, either in written form or in the form of responding to the survey that we developed. As you all might have seen or might know, there were several press releases. There were areas on our website. There was a social media push where the survey and encouragement for members of the public to send in written public comment. Those opportunities were made known, and we were really happy to see the amount of feedback that we received. But needless to say, we are very, very busy, and we are working really hard to make sure that all of that feedback is incorporated, but in a way that will make sense for this task force to be kind of productive moving forward. So I think that's kind of about it on my end in terms of framing for this conversation. Natalie or Joel, I think, and maybe Joel, since you will be kind of live editing this document that I've linked in the chat, I wonder if you would be comfortable with doing a screen share from here on out. And it looks like kind of what we'll do is we'll get kickstarted with some key questions for the committee members to kind of reflect on and start talking about, some high-level questions. And I think Natalie will kick us off with that, and then we'll start to get into a little bit more detail and start kind of looking at the recommendations line by line and doing a little bit more of that line editing in just a bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lubna. And Natalie, kick it to you to guide us into the facilitated questions for today.
Fantastic, and thanks so much, Lubna, for that kind of rundown of how we got to this point and the next steps. I'm excited to take the next, we have a little bit over an hour where we really want to get to a place where we're getting specific recommendations and input from task force members and subcommittee members on specific best practices. And before we dive in, we want to sort of start with, and I guess I should say, so Lubna's going to help us stay on track and really kind of move this. We don't want to feel rushed, but we want to make sure this is really an important point at which we can ensure that the next draft reflects input from task force members. So I want to make sure that we were able to get through this whole piece. And I will say, so what we're looking at now, and I think Lubna made this clear, is the revisions and the track changes that we're seeing in this document include the takeaways and recommendations coming out of the focus group process, the input received in over the course of several subcommittee meetings from each of you, as well as what we heard from Air Pollution Control Division, AQCC staff, as well as comments and recommendations I've heard as serving as air quality liaison at public meetings. And so it's really meant to try to capture a lot of what we've heard in the last year, and especially in the last 6 months. And there's still more, and there's still more opportunity here. So just to kick it off, we wanted to start with 3 key questions. And then what we'll do is we'll look specifically at each individual best practice as articulated in the Environmental Justice Act and ask you all to give us edits. So we're going to start with these 3 questions, and then we'll go into our 6 best practices. And then we've added a 7th, which is the participation incentives. So first, what would be really helpful to help us, let me see if I can turn off that, sorry guys, notifications here, so you can't. Apologies. Okay, so I think just to sort of set the stage, and these key questions apply to all of the best practices that we'll go into detail in after this. So I think one question that came up, and this came up a lot, I think this concern and this call came up a lot through the focus group conversations, as well as a lot of the input we heard from communities and from task force members, is just recognizing that communities are unique, and how is it's really important to tailor community engagement to specific communities and not assume that a cookie cutter or a one-size-fits-all approach is going to work. And so a question for all of you to consider, and I'd like to hear responses here, is, should agencies have some discretion in how they apply these best practices so that they're able to tailor their approach, knowing that a particular community prefers Saturday meetings, or wants more than 2 languages, or more meetings, and things like that. So let me just stop with this one question and ask, recognizing the uniqueness of communities, should agencies have some discretion in applying these best practices? And I think if you want to speak, please feel free to raise your hand physically, or your Zoom hand, and we can start a queue here. Jonathan.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I mean, I would just say that I kind of think that that's like inherent in the idea of a best practice, right? It is like, these are suggestions, guidelines, best practices, things that agencies should look at, and then, put together an approach on, a specific plan or something like that. So it seems like some level of kind of flexibility, discretion is kind of inherent in the root of the question that we're wrestling with here, which is best practices. So to me, it makes sense to, certainly have discretion amongst these, and these are concepts, ideas, suggestions, quote unquote, best practices.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Jamie.
Thanks, Natalie. My first inclination is to agree with Jonathan and say I would lean toward a yes on that question. Although there are some concerns that come to mind, and I'm not sure necessarily how best to deal with those. I guess my main concern, I guess, would be just that there might be, I don't know, misuse of that ability in ways that might, I guess, lead to leaving certain communities out and right back to some of the issues we've seen. And so, but yeah, I think it is, when we talk about best practices, I think it is kind of inherent that, like Jonathan said, it's kind of suggestions on best ways to do certain things. And I would imagine that there is some, I mean, in my mind, I guess that leaves open the possibility for some latitude on how those are applied and when, where, and things like that. So I guess those are my thoughts. I'm really interested to hear what some other folks think. So I'll just go ahead and stop there.
Great, thanks so much, Jamie. And just to run down the queue, I see Mara, and then Marcia, and then Renee, and then Ilda.
Thanks so much. I would echo with what Jamie and Jonathan had mentioned, but I do want to say that I think that there are some overlying best practices that always need to be considered, right? In terms of inclusiveness and appropriate outreach measures and notifications, that those maybe, if there is room to make sure that those are highlighted, that can't be sort of picked and chosen over, I think that would probably be preferable. I would also echo Jaime's point about misuse of that ability to have a little bit of latitude on that. I want to make sure that people are doing and agencies are doing their best to employ these whenever possible.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Mara. I will just jump in to say, for a little bit of context, since we're trying to be specific here, I think one place this has come up a lot is the requirement in the EJ Act to have 3 different meetings, one in the weekday, one in the evening, and one in the weekend. And that's something that in our experience hasn't always been a reflection of the priorities for that community. So it's not a way that would be, it's not to open the door to undermine general inclusivity, but it's really that kind of, is that level of specificity valuable, or is that actually missing the mark in terms of responding to the uniqueness of the community? Marcia, and then Renee, and then Ilda.
Thanks, Natalie. I would agree. I would vote for agencies to have discretion on best practices. You know, I cannot speak for other agencies, but I would even go further to say, yes, communities, there is a uniqueness to different communities, but there is even uniqueness to different types of projects. There are going to be some agencies that have a role, right, where they're looking to build a program that focuses on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how that agency practices in the community. But for those agencies that may not have the resources or the staff and the ability to build these programs, I do think that there should be something in place to help give them the guidance. But for, I guess I would say, larger agencies, I mean, it depends on how they're engaged in the community. They should have the discretion on building their practices. And I think what you'll see is many of them are going to have some alignment with their best practices. And you're going to see different levels of relationships too that can help support those efforts, even through different agencies.
Thanks so much, Marcia. Renee.
I have a couple questions, discretions to apply, because when I look at Indigenous communities, state and federal agencies already have issues with projections, bias, and erasure as is. So it's being really mindful of, again, cultural and trauma sensitivity. So I was kind of writing some notes, just hearing everybody discuss. And I would hope that agencies do the work to tailor the needs, but how do they know what those needs really are to the community and the nature of those decisions if they're not working with grassroots organizations? So there should be some type of list of grassroots organizations that already work, or maybe no protocols, or already have certain types of bridging that they can help enrich those best practices when it comes to implementation. Because it's one thing to actually have recommendations, and it's another thing to how we're going to actually implement these active protocols within community too. And there's going to be a lot of cultural nuances and sensitivity that we need to be mindful of in going in those spaces, and also being mindful of trauma and erasures, especially in an equitable way if you're going to be authentic for representation for those communities in applying this type of engagement, if any of that made sense. And most of all, to hold state and federal agencies to recognize where there's been barriers to implementing best practices already, and heal those gaps or heal those erasures by bringing in maybe contractors or others that can help in those certain avenues to be able to train staff or to be able to help with that type of cultural and trauma sensitivity too.
Wonderful, thanks, Renee. I really appreciate that input. It's a little bit tricky. What we're trying to do here is to talk about some of these cross-cutting issues, because some of we will get down into some of the details where a lot of the I think there are some responses to some of the things that you flagged. So I just want to make sure we're acknowledging that we'll get to that place. Ilda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Renee, for that comment. And I think there is such an aspect of that implementation and how it becomes actually a plan by agencies. I agree. I think each agency will respond a little bit different for this recommendations. I think there needs to be, and I don't know if this will be a recommendation added, that needs to be a follow-up plan within the next month after this recommendations are released of each agency doing an audit of which ones are immediately going to implement, that there will be a must-have. And I think, as you mentioned, Renee, what are the gaps? Where are the gaps in which why they might not be able to implement some? What are the budgetary gaps? And I know we have talked about this a lot. There's going to be a price tag to a lot of the recommendations that we're talking about. But my recommendation would be that there is a follow through, because if not, if agencies get to pick and choose which implementation items they're going to be able to add, it could be only convenient, you know, only for this meeting, we can do this, and then it can make it difficult. I agree, Marcia. I think by different projects, and I think according to agencies, they can identify this kind of type of projects should be able to have these processes. But I would say that each agency has somewhat of a DEI representative, that I won't say that, you know, that there are only certain projects that are DEI intensive, there are some that are not. Each project should be looked at it within the state agencies, which are DEI lens. And that includes community engagement and community collaboration in the process.
Thanks so much, Ilda. Jonathan, did you still have your hand up?
Nope, sorry, I just forgot to take it down.
Great. Great, thanks. And Joel's taking working to try and capture some of the key takeaways, recognize, and I think he's summarized them here. If you want to take a look at that, saying sort of summarizing the agency should have some discretion in applying the best practices on a case-by-case basis, depending on the unique needs of the community and the nature of the agency action. But also recognizing that we'll need some kind of baseline standards that all agencies must follow that can limit that discretion to ensure that communities aren't left out as a result.
And as much as we all hate live wordsmithing documents on Zoom, you know, obviously we are also taking the same detailed notes we take on every meeting, but I would welcome reflection from the task force members who just spoke or others who haven't spoke up yet about whether I sort of accurately summarized what we just heard into kind of a condensed statement, or if you would suggest edits, and we can definitely do some live editing on what I just wrote down.
Yeah, I think my edit will be that there should be a baseline that are mandatory for all agencies, but within each agency for them to do an analysis of which ones they will go beyond just the mandatory pieces, and where are the gaps where they cannot go even to the full recommendations. Because I think if not, we're meeting the floor, and that's not ideal for this. Like there should be an extensive process, or I wouldn't say extensive, but a process for them to develop what are going to be specific ones that they're going to be taking on beyond the basic ones, which I will highlight. The basic ones are in the EJ Act. So I don't, I think there will have to be a degree higher than what is mandatory in the EJ Act for it to be the baseline from what is recommended from this task force. That's mandatory.
Elizabeth, I see Elizabeth has raised her hand.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my comment probably just echoes a lot of what has been said, but I think also some language around agency capability, and that kind of goes towards what Hilda is saying with maybe doing some planning or scoping around where the gaps are to get that agency to the point of being able to implement all of these best practices for community engagement. But I just think depending on the size of the agency, whether or not it's a regulatory agency with that type of authority, it's going to look pretty different in terms of how agencies interact with communities. And so I really like Renee's point of trying to provide those resources and steps to get them there. And these types of recommendations being a resource for agencies that might not have, EDI focused staff or just embarking on that process, and have that be like a starting point for these agencies to scope further work to get them to the right level of and be able to apply these best practices.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Sorry, Natalie. Ilda and Elizabeth, did I accurately capture a summary of what you said there? And I don't want to belabor the point, but we'll try to work kind of the specific language into the next draft, so you'll have time to provide feedback. But just wanted to make sure we're on track. So I will assume we are for the rest of the meeting without asking. So jump in if we're not.
Thank you so much, Joel, for sharing that. I think we can move to the next question. That was terrific. I think this is a really valuable discussion, so I don't want to rush it, but we'll keep moving forward. So this is the next key question is asking which agencies should apply these best practices for community engagement, and specifically this question, and this is one we discussed at a meeting maybe 2 months ago. Should it be the Air Quality Control Commission, or the Air Pollution Control Division? And we should say also the EJ Act also now applies to the Water Quality Control Commission as well. And so we heard from the Air Pollution Control Division and the Air Quality Control Commission. Right now, the Environmental Justice Act defines agency as the commission. And so this is the volunteer governor nominated body that hears rulemakings, and whereas the division is made up of the more technical staff who are doing more of the day-to-day work. And I would say the main takeaway and what we heard from those staff representatives was that with the definition of agency limited to the commission, the timing of when the community engagement and public meetings are convened is actually later in the process than it would be in the division. So we ended up having, meetings prior to rulemakings at the enhanced outreach meetings that the Air Quality Control Commission convened last fall, following the best practices guidance. But really at that point, there's that misses the sort of early stakeholder and the opportunity when communities can engage in a more impactful way than when it's already at the stage of a rulemaking. And so I just wonder if folks can speak to, in light of what we've heard and maybe some of your own experiences with either of these agencies in air or water, both commission or division, do you have thoughts on, should it stay the same and focus on, or the primary responsible implementing agency is the commission, or should it be shifted to the division, which would open up to earlier stakeholder engagement? And I guess sort of the same process, if folks want to raise their hand and take the cue, we can start the conversation on this question.
Natalie, I'll break the silence while people are thinking, and just ask our task force members whether there's additional information that we as your staff can provide you either in this meeting or in the future that would help you answer this question. It really is a very important one for us at the health department, because we want to make sure that the engagement is effective as much as possible and reaching communities and also follow the law, right? And so it's a really important question for us, though I realize there aren't representatives from the CDPHE on this subcommittee today, but I am really curious if there's ideas that your colleagues who are also on the task force, who are those CDPHE representatives, can share in the future, or information we can bring as staff, either from our own experiences in implementing the Environmental Justice Act, or research we can do before the next meeting that would be helpful for you, because this is a critical question, but we know it's one that this subcommittee hasn't necessarily been able to answer yet.
I would like a little bit more background about which would influence implementation faster, commission or division in that space. If that makes sense. But yeah, I wouldn't know until.
I mean, I can share a little bit about what the implementation has looked like to date. So in the last year, and I don't think it has to be that if it's division where some of this engagement is required, it doesn't mean that there's no opportunity before the commission as well. And what's been happening now, and what staff shared at an earlier meeting, was that the air division, because there's a commitment and interest in doing more and earlier, more meaningful community engagement, air division staff are convening early stakeholder processes 12 to 18 months in advance of rulemaking, so that there's a chance to hear from community and adjust the rule in those early stages of drafting. And then the commission's also convening the meeting, these engagement meetings that are also required, but at that stage, it's a month or two before rulemaking, which means the division's done most of their technical work and are less well positioned to make some adjustments. I'm not sure if I don't think I fully am responding to your question, Renee, because that's part of what we want the question, and we want to hear from all of you. But I think one takeaway is that a lot of times too, I think the community engagement we want to include and engage the subject matter experts and some of the people who are doing this work from the air division sort of technical side of things, and get to a place of making that information more accessible for the community, so there can be a dialogue between those technical experts, and the community members can speak directly to those individuals. And so that, to me, that's shifting it to the division might help take away a bit of a layer and ensure those kinds of conversations.
Hi, may I see your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you for that, Natalie, and thanks for the question, Renee. Based on what I think I just heard Natalie, you say, is It seems to me like community engagement, my preference would be that community engagement would start as early on in the process as possible. And so, yeah, I would be inclined to say, based on that, it would start with the division, based on what you had to say. And then, if at all possible, I would think, again, my preference would be that it would continue on at all phases. And so I would say both commission and division may have some role to play. I don't know the intricacies there as well as some of you that are on staff. And so, you know, there may be some things I'm missing, but yeah, that's, again, my first inclination is to say I would like to see community engagement as early on in the process and continuing as much as possible throughout the process or processes. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Jamie. That's helpful, and I think that's kind of what implementation is looking like at this point. The division's doing the earlier stages, and the commission's doing the kind of closest to the rulemaking stages, and this is just the rulemaking piece. Ilda, please.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Jaime. I think being able to engage individuals from a division level and community members, I know we want to get the voices from the experts, but community members are just as experts in those spaces as they have been those spaces, and especially individuals that are native to those lands and to those spaces, making sure that their voices are heard from the beginning of the process. And I think something that is a reminder is that this best practices and saying 30 days before a meeting, that's when we have to announce it, or it's begin, or how long early we have to start the process. It's a baseline, I think, that where we want to see the agencies go into, and I think it's just sort of a reminder in this space that that is like the bar is, that's the lowest space in the bar when we're talking at engaging the community members and all the divisions and all the pieces of the process. So, and I don't know if that, and obviously I don't want to send us to a low bar either, as we're thinking about engagement in all levels of each process.
Terrific, thanks, Ilda. And I think that's a helpful reminder that this is really, this is the best practices and a baseline that agencies can build from. Joel, should we pause there? I'm not sure how much, I know a lot just came through.
Yeah, I wasn't quite done capturing that, but maybe everyone can see me typing in real time. I'll just do it in this document and then reflect. I think there was kind of some clear ideas from Ilda and Jaime there. So with apologies, I will continue typing and then see what the task force members think if I accurately captured.
Yeah, and as Natalie mentioned, I will encourage any members of the agencies that are present in the meeting, if you'd like to drop a comment or raise your hand, more than happy to have you, as part of it.
Terrific, thanks. Should folks review that language, Joel?
Please do, yeah. And with my apologies, you all saw me type it as we went, and I'm sure if I thought about it a little more, it would be better, but tried to capture that suggestion.
Any thoughts or comments or recommendations based on that initial draft that Joel cranked out? Great, thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. That's great.
Thank you, Ilda. Terrific. So if there aren't other comments, I propose we keep moving forward. I appreciate everyone moving along at this quick pace. So this is sort of the third of the three key questions we wanted to start with, and then we'll dive into the best practices themselves. So maybe just scroll up so we can still see that question, Joel. Sorry. So if these best practices are going to apply to specific types of agency decisions, which types of actions should those be? And what we are seeing here are the results from the surveys. We received more than 200 surveys, including this kind of this question of which agency actions should be required to have enhanced outreach. And what you can see in the choices were, should it be rulemaking, should it be permitting, should it be enforcement, or something else? And the votes on the rulemaking, permitting, enforcement choice were pretty similar. You can kind of see that in the mid to high 60s, everyone supported that type of decision-making or action should be subject to enhanced outreach. And then as Joel scrolled down, there's some other areas where people wrote in other ideas of, could be budgetary or land use decisions. So I think the question for this group today is, should these best practices apply? What are the agency actions that these best practices should apply to? So I think if people need more information, please let me know, or if people want to raise a hand and share some comments on which agency actions should be subject to these best practices.
And Natalie, just to add a little more context, because you and I read the Environmental Justice Act every day. So for our task force members who maybe haven't looked at it as recently, currently the law does require the Air Quality Control Commission to follow the best practices for rulemaking, permitting, and enforcement, which were why those were the three options included in the survey. I'll just note, reflecting back on our last two conversations, it's worth thinking about if this looks different in terms of agency discretion. And then, of course, a very, very small number of permitting and enforcement actions go to the commission. So really only something that's contested or appealed, which is very rare, right? Like maybe one or two a year, sometimes less than that. But the division, of course, processes hundreds, if not thousands, of enforcement as well as permitting actions. So just reflecting that many of these questions are interrelated as well. So just wanted to provide that additional context of what the statute currently says and make sure everyone's thinking through the connection between these different questions that we posed for you all.
Perfect, thanks, Joel. I see Jonathan has raised a hand.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, on this, I would be really interested if there is some level of analysis or additional background from the agency. I mean, exactly to Joel's point, right? I mean, it's kind of like, how do you hit the sweet spot with being, doing these best practices and then really, being able to engage the community in the right way on key decisions and, and even minor decisions, but that might have impacts to folks that need to know about them, at the same time, not overwhelming folks and kind of being, understanding what ones are maybe less important to you, or to Joel's point, right? Like the thousands of like individual, other kind of small permits or things like that kind of, go through sort of part of the process. So I would be interested for maybe more information or analysis from the agency on if there's a good way to kind of strike that balance, or clear dividing lines that might kind of already exist that we should know about.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any other comments or input from task force members?
Hey, Natalie, this is Marcia. I'm going to be fully transparent. I'm still trying to process this question.
Yeah,
And
sure.
two, because I'm looking through a transportation lens and figuring out exactly what you're asking. Forgive me if I don't get it, but this one I'm going to need a minute to kind of process, because you're saying like how best practice, what specific type of agency decision. I mean, for us, I don't know that we do any rule making or permitting necessarily. For us, it's deciding on projects, right? And even down to the scope of that particular project. So for me, as I think about my agency and what we do, it really boils down from, the decision we make from where a project is located to how we proceed in that community. So I think I'm just rambling right now. I need to process this one. It applies to all actions within our agency. And I think it's going to differ from different agencies, maybe is my point. And it might be a little difficult to narrow down and say, agencies should do X, Y, Z, when it may not even apply to that particular agency. We're so broad in what we're doing. So this is it's a little bit difficult. Perhaps it's just me.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a great point. Go ahead, Ilda.
Yeah, and my question was going to be maybe more for folks that might not know every decision that each agency is making. If I'm curious, and I almost can see it in a chart of almost like all the decisions that can be possible by agencies, and almost like a check mark of which decisions are made by each agency. So it might make it an easier decision also, because I'm guessing this question is going to play out for multiple subcommittees, not just ours. Yeah, I'm just curious if there is a list of the decisions that are made by each agency.
Funny you asked, Ilda. We did, in fact, make that chart at the request of a different subcommittee. So the Equity Analysis and Cumulative Impact Subcommittee posed a very similar question to staff, I think actually at its first meeting. So we administered a survey back around, I think probably February, maybe March, maybe January, I can't remember exactly, to kind of get agencies to weigh in with sort of, do they do rulemaking? Do they do enforcement? Do they do permitting? Do they kind of make other types of project plan decisions? Do they do grant making? So the results are there. It's not the most user-friendly document because we are talking about complex legal concepts. So of course, we as your staff are happy to help answer those questions if you have any, but I definitely encourage the members of this subcommittee to review that document and reflect on it. Obviously, you can't digest it all right away, but especially going into August. And if you have any questions about it and sort of what it means, please feel free to come to us. And I did maybe actually, while I'm talking, kind of want to respond to Marcia's comment and Ilda's comment with it. I think the way the Environmental Justice Act is written now, it includes these three categories of action: rulemaking, permitting, and enforcement, because those are the main things that the Air Quality Control Commission does, and that is currently the only agency that these practices apply to. So I think that's kind of part of the reason for the limitation. So I think if the vision of the task force above is that these best practices could be implemented by other agencies and or be sort of referred to them, it would kind of be, I think we can think about, or you all can think about how that would work in practice, right? Kind of getting back to the discretion question that we talked about earlier.
Thanks, Joel. Renee, I think you raised your hand, and Jonathan, I'm not sure if you've got another comment.
No, just not skilled with lowering the hand after I've raised my hand.
Thank you. Renee.
No judgments, Jonathan. I do the same normally. I have a couple questions. Is there any way that we can think about how it can be absolutely available if that's the case for state and federal agencies, and that's incorporating maybe virtual and audio comments for community and recorded comments, or a place that we can have community send those things when they're not able to join in standing meetings or in other times, and having some type of availability within those state and federal agencies so that there's always somebody that's going to be able to have that specific type of implementation from communities back, or from the agency's best practices to community through those agencies' decisions.
I think that's a really important point, Renee, and and we're taking really careful notes, and I think that's something we could capture in the how agencies collect and receive input from communities. That's one of the best practices we'll get to. So I absolutely don't want to cut you off, but I think we want to insert that in the best practice conversation that we'll get to, if that sounds okay to you.
No worries, thank you.
Awesome.
I'm not sure I've heard kind of clear direction or ideas necessarily so much as questions and additional information here. So I won't maybe provide a synthesis like I did for those other two questions, but I think it's really helpful to know what information we as your staff need to get to you as the task force to kind of get an answer for this at the next discussion, which will be the full task force meeting in August. And I think to both to Jonathan's point and Ilda's point, it seems like kind of that, at least for the air division and commission, and potentially also the water commission, that the division that this applies to currently, it would be really helpful for the agency representatives from those agencies to kind of bring forward their thoughts and statistics about how many decisions are we talking, and what does this look like in practice. So we'll make sure that we follow up with Robin and Trisha respectively about making sure they come to those meetings ready to present that information. So thank you. We don't have to answer every question, but it's helpful for us as your staff to know what you need to kind of move the conversation along next time.
Thanks, Joel. I did want to just flag, there's a comment from Velma Campbell as well in the chat that we want to make sure we capture, also kind of asking questions about how we proceed here. So I think with that, we can go to the cross-cutting recommendations. And so some of this should be pretty familiar. This is the draft. This is getting to the language that's been circulated, and some of this does incorporate feedback we've received from you that we're working to add, as well as input in what we received, what we heard from the focus groups, as well as from other agents from the Air Pollution Control Division and Air Quality Control Commissioners. So there are a couple of cross-cutting issues, and then we can get into the specific best practices. We're a bit behind, but I think this has been really helpful to hear from you on these details. So I propose we keep going forward if everyone agrees. And I think, and some of these issues are I think Renee and Ilda and some others gave us some insight into some of these items that are going to come up. So one cross-cutting issue that has been inserted and is proposed is around capacity building to conduct meaningful community engagement. And this is both agency capacity as well as community capacity. And so I'll give you all a chance to look at that, but the idea is that there should be funds that are built into these agency budgets that are providing additional resources to actually have dedicated personnel to address capacity concerns, and also actually have the capacity and the personnel and the resources to build these community partnerships. So I wonder if people have thought about this sort of agency, before you even get to the details of the best practices components. This is talking about how do you build that agency capacity, and what does that capacity mean? What are some of the key components of it? There's also a piece that's around the community capacity. and ongoing relationships with community connectors. This is something that came out, I think came out before we heard from the focus groups, and then was reinforced, this importance of paid community connectors as one of many ways to build those relationships and build trust and connection to communities in a way that's going to better enable an agency to be more responsive, to understand community priorities and concerns, and adjust practices and engagement accordingly. Just stop there. Renee?
I was about to put it in the chat too, really quick, because I actually will have to hop off pretty soon. Education is going to be a key part on both sides, educational, cultural, and trauma sensitivity for state and federal agencies to be allies and accomplices for DIC communities and communities overall. And also just recognizing historical and known erasures that contribute to a lot of environmental injustice too. And educating state and federal agents to recognize that sometimes institutions can perpetuate that. Also education for and with community to be able to engage in new sectors and new industries in an equitable analysis or an equitable way too, so that they can actually be proactive in the next, whether it's public comment or council or commissions themselves, so that they can start being able to be more involved in their own communities too. And what capacities the state and federal agencies can hold within that. I think long-term funding is going to be key, but starting with education on both sides.
Terrific, thanks Renee. And I don't think education is specifically named in this, so I'm glad you raised that.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions?
Just a quick comment for me, and maybe as the EJ program staff, kind of like Joel and I have been wordsmithing the recommendations kind of day and night recently. And so I think what would be most helpful during this session is as like task force members read each of these recommendations, if they're, I mean, at this point we are literally wordsmithing. So if there's language that you would like to be changed or omitted or anything else added in, for example, Renee, you mentioning education, I think that would be the most helpful thing at this point. And I feel like it's probably really easy for us, and just, I wanted to say this at the very beginning before we get into the recommendations. You know, we have been having some of these like higher level conversations. There's a lot of examples for our task force members to draw on, given all of your work. And so I think one thing that we have established is like the importance of community engagement and the fact that we do want to reach our most disproportionately impacted communities. And like right now we are trying to get the exact wording as to like how this is actually implementable. And so if that could be the focus, you know, for the next few minutes as we're kind of going through each of these sentences, that would be much appreciated as staff who are trying to like get to use these times. This is a really precious time that we don't get with the task force members that often. So yeah, that input would be much appreciated.
Yeah, Lovna, I'm curious for sakes of time, but also wordsmithing. I know task force members have access to making comments. Like, should we go like A1, comments, thoughts, approved to move forward, thumbs up, A2, would that work? Would that be the best way? I want to also, I see the EJ unit. I'm wondering, I want to maybe get a couple thumbs up for the other subcommittee members. And then for consensus. Cannot see all your thumbs because of the share screen. Unless there are no thumbs up, and then you would like to talk in detail of each one of them.
I'm sorry, Hilda, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, so my facilitation was because we want to get through them, and actually we never got through them during the in-person meeting. That we can go, for example, A1, do we feel comfortable with it? And EJ task force members do have access to this document in the computer. If you do not have access to your computer, maybe flag it to somebody and submit the comment in the chat. Maybe you want, I'm gonna put you out there, unit staff, maybe chat it to Lovna or Natalie, the unit staff, or Joel, and they can add it to it for the wordsmithing. But for timeliness sake, going A1, approve, thumbs up, yes. A2, move on that way so we can get through it. And then if there's an item that you feel compelled to actually have a discussion, please bring it up, or any items that are missing in a section. Maybe we can take a pause between sections and ask if folks have items to be added.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. I think, yeah, the what to add, what to delete, what to change. And if people can read through these, we can try and go through as much as we can in the next half hour.
So if folks can give me a thumbs up, or if it's not a thumbs up, I don't think my emoji thing has a thumbs down. So Renee, I see a thumbs up there. PETA, that's a community member, I'm guessing. Jaime, Jonathan Asher, KC subcommittee members, using their thumbs. Marsha, okay, I was gonna actually call you out, Marsha. I was like, Marsha, are you cool with this? Okay, cool. So let's move on. Lubna, do you want to facilitate it? Maybe, so if you have comments to edit, send it to Natalie or Joel.
I can keep walking us through the document if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's helpful. And I think what we'll just try to do as staff is maybe not narrate every sentence, and that way give more space to the task force members to have time to read on their own.
Sure. So now we're looking at B, pro bono air quality attorneys. What to add, delete, change.
Do we only want to limit it to air quality attorneys? Just ask for the rest of this other task force members. Would we want to extend it beyond that?
Ilda, I think to clarify that, I think that is the recommendation. So currently we do maintain this list of air quality attorneys, but I think the recommendation is to sort of expand that, though if you think it would be helpful to explicitly spell out that would
like
include
toxic exposure, there's so many other different that maybe I'm not coming up with the names of those specific, but there's so many other kinds of lawyers that should be outside there, because there's so many other environmental justice issues across the state, I guess, outside of just air quality.
I completely agree with Hilda. There's intersections of water quality and a number of cumulative impacts. So just being mindful about if we can expand past just air quality, but how it might intersect with other environmental injustice.
Great, thanks Ilda and Renee. Any other comments on B? Okay, some support from Jamie. Are we good to move on to subpart C?
Yeah, so this is other subcommittee member thumbs up.
I'll just note on my end, I can't really toggle back and forth between looking at the text and providing a thumbs up very quickly. So non-reaction is tacit agreement for me. I will speak up if there's an issue.
That's terrific.
Otherwise,
thanks,
it's an ongoing thumbs up.
Great.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, let's move into C.
So this was speaking to agencies developing centralized guidance on how to implement best practices for community engagement. Are people okay with this language? Any edits or adjustments?
I think Renee had included also community partners, right? Like not just community centers and host meetings, but also community partners or community organizations that are doing the work in the ground or in those areas.
Yep, perfect.
Agree with that as well.
Great support for that. Thanks, Ilda. Are we good to move forward? Any concerns or additional comments?
Can I throw in education on this one too? Centralized guidance and education.
Renee, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I totally understand. Do you mean, could you explain more about what you mean?
Sure, because sometimes education can even relate to land use. So knowing even how communities have used that space before, what have been impacts before, and really understanding a lot of context when it comes to just how communities have been treated in that space, not just redline, but have actually treated the space in order to either be restorative or have worked in community in a certain way that was effective. Did that answer?
So like you're saying, each agency needs to develop centralized guidance and education on how to implement best practices?
Yes. So it's kind of a form of equity.
Okay. So it's not that they're just creating the guidance, but their staff is being capacitated to implement those as well.
Yes, so that they can pass it down to whoever takes that role next time too.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about this, is because this is going to be an ongoing process. Like there might be a training initially for as this is implemented, but this should be ongoing as, you know, next staff and there's turnover, etc. Great. Feeling good on C.
So I think now we can move into the actual 6 best practices. The first one is timing of meetings, and there are 2 options there. The current language requires at least three meetings during the day, evening, and weekends. And so there are 2 options proposed. People can vote for 1 or 2.
And Natalie, very quickly, despite our promise not to jump in, this is the only other topic that was part of the survey that we administered throughout July. So I did want to just quickly summarize those survey results, which was basically to say this was the hardest survey results to interpret. So when presented with the options of 2 or 3 meetings, about 30% of respondents favored either 2 or 3. There were actually lots of folks who kind of wrote in other and suggested either 1 or 0. And then actually, I really wanted to flag this because it was one of the, I think, best ideas I saw come from the public in the survey, in my opinion. But really a recommendation that maybe the number and the nature of the meetings change based on sort of the nature and the importance of the issue that the agency is engaging about. So maybe not being as fixed and prescriptive about the number of meetings that are required under the law, but instead sort of tailor that to the importance of the topic. You know, something that we know a lot of DI disproportionately impacted community members care about is the Suncor refinery air pollution permit, and that might be treated differently in terms of the number of engagement sessions than a rulemaking to correct a typo that's in the current law. So just wanted to put that out there, and sorry to break our promise on not summarizing, but kind of help everyone interpret that dense block of survey data.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is like, who determines the importance of these issues? Is it the importance to, like, the communities may see certain issues as more important than the CDPHE or other government agency, etc. So yeah, I guess that's a flag. That's a red flag for me.
Do folks have thoughts on the option 1 or option 2, in addition to the one that the sort of additional idea that Joel flagged from the survey?
See Jonathan's hand up.
Great. Yeah, Jonathan, then Elizabeth.
Thanks. Yeah, I think so. Just so I'm understanding the question to us clearly, it's either some level of, are you asking us to choose between 1 and 2, or kind of wordsmith 1 and 2 that that some level of discretion would be given to the agencies to kind of choose option 1 or option 2 based on the scenario, based on the feedback from the community, based on the members of who might be attending the listening session, et cetera. Are you asking to kind of us to choose between option 1 and 2, kind of a 2 versus 3 system format?
Yeah, for the purposes of the recommendations, we're inviting task force members to vote for one of the options.
Or none of the options. We did. Yeah, we did. You know, we had developed these 2 options based on the conversations we heard from you in the past. But obviously now we've heard from the public too through the survey, and there were additional ideas raised. So yeah, we are sort of inviting your preference for either of the 2 options you all had discussed before, or one of the new ideas that came from the public in the survey.
Elizabeth's hand.
I guess I would, I'm leaning towards option 1, and I also feel like would be also useful to maybe put in some type of caveat language, like, you know, depending on, it's great to hold weekends, meetings on the weekend if there's a lot of community engagement and you're seeing a big turnout. But if you're just holding a meeting on the weekend and there's not a lot of community engagement, and then that's also burning out the agency staff, doesn't seem like that lack of flexibility is a good thing. So I think it definitely should be a conversation with the community connectors and the people that know that community well and can relay the community preference back to agency staff. And it could be, I think 2, a minimum of 2 is a good thing. With shooting for 3, but with the flexibility to change, you know, and not have that dictated whether it's nighttime meetings or during working hours or on the weekend, due to like the turnout of the community that you're seeing, trying out those different types of meeting times.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other comments or recommendations on either option 1 or 2?
Natalie, this is Marcia. Initially, I was, you know, leaning towards option 2, and that's based off of, you know, for our agency, as we've done a number of different events across the state, you know, at the end of the day, our intent was always to meet community where they are. And I think that depends on the relationship, right, that you have and the conversations you have. And some of our events were successful where we were having meetings on weekends and evenings. In terms of like the number of meetings, absolutely more than 1, right? But I could even say, depending on your relationship with the community, you could have more than 3. So I think I'm leaning towards what, I forgot who just spoke. Was that Elizabeth who just spoke? You know, a caveat saying a minimum, right? A floor number of this, with the ability to go above based on your engagement or relationship with the community and the needs of that particular project. It is going to vary based, at least for my agency, it will definitely vary with those many different factors. And I don't think we'll really know until we have, you know, that dialogue with community. They may not want weekends. They may not want evenings. We don't know that. We can't assume, but some guidance like this, I think, will work. A minimum of 2 as a floor.
Is there support for this option 1 language suggested by Elizabeth and then further amended by Marcia?
Yeah, this is Jonathan. I like that general direction. I mean, I think kind of a minimum of 2 and then build off of that with kind of input from the community, depending on individual needs.
Great, thanks.
See, hi, Ms. Hand, please.
I'm still inclined the other direction towards 1. Mainly because, well, mainly because of the percentages there, the answers to the survey questions, I think. I think it's pretty close, but I feel like whenever possible, there should be, or I'm sorry, I was saying leaning towards 2. That's what I meant to say.
Okay.
Yeah, option 2.
You'd be more supportive of option 2, Jamie?
Yes, sorry about that. I meant option 2.
Okay. For three meetings.
Yeah, basically because I think that's kind of what we came up with when working on the legislation. And then it looks like there's plenty of community support based on survey responses as well, so.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we do not want to go, our task force recommendations don't want to go below stat 2 of what is right now in the EJ Act. I'll say that almost like a minimum of 3 meetings should be established, but rather than 2.
I'd like to also acknowledge Velma's comment there. If we're going to go with a minimum of 2, I think it should be made clear to the communities that they can certainly ask for more as well. But I still support 3.
Yeah, my only concern with the committee being able to request for more is with sort of like some of the timings of processes. Like when is the cutoff to ask for more? Like, is it a week after the number of meetings is going to be released? Does that make sense? Like, how do we implement that? And I know there can be regulations or like, you know, restrictions around our rules, but I'm curious about that one.
I think that if we're going to have a minimum of 2 meetings or different meeting times at either of those and or at the outreach for those, it can be made clear that if the community wants more than those 2 meetings, they can ask for more. Like at the initial onset of outreach efforts.
Could it be like community connectors and community partners? If, for example, community organizations have this many days, or like even community members have this many days to request for one?
Yeah, I think
like
that's
10 days after the initial meeting times are posted.
I definitely think that would be reasonable.
I mean, I would just add, as someone who's worked to convene a lot of these meetings, I think part of the balance as staff and conveners of meetings is just taking into account community fatigue, which is mentioned here, or I guess I think it was mentioned, but also in our experience when we convened 3 meetings, oftentimes there was one that was significantly underattended compared to others. And there are lots of different reasons that could contribute to that, and additional outreach and community connectors and a lot of the other recommendations could contribute to strengthening that. But I think sometimes community members we heard from community members that it was confusing that there were 3, or they weren't sure if they had to show up for all. And so that's I think part of where some of these recommendations are just wondering, how do we make this responsive as a starting place, as opposed to a requirement of 3 when a few people show up, particularly to some of the Saturday morning meetings that we convened were underattended.
Thanks, Natalie. That's helpful.
Do we feel like we need to take an official vote, or we want to floor this one in order to keep moving? Or...
Maybe what I can recommend is, if there isn't clear consensus, we can keep multiple options in the draft at this time, right? That's why they're there, is there wasn't consensus in the past from the subcommittee, and that's fine. You know, at the August meeting, we will be starting to convene some straw polls, obviously not the final vote of the task force, but you know, this would be kind of a good subject for one of those straw polls, right? To kind of gauge the overall preferences of the task force. Does that sound okay? Great. And then I did see actually one of our new team members, Rebecca Vigil, just came on camera. Rebecca, I don't know if you were trying to jump in, or if you're just kind of saying hi, but wanted to give you a chance if you're trying to speak up there.
Thank you, Joel. No, I just had my camera off, but I'm here and listening and present.
Welcome, Rebecca. Okay, this drives us into notice.
So I think this is one where the current requirement requires at least 30 days notice in advance of public input or a public comment period. That's what's provided in the Environmental Justice Act. And so the additional language is this statement here. So if people think this would be, can edit it, delete pieces of it, add to it. But this adds to the minimum of a 30-day notice prior to community engagement or community, like a community meeting or public comment. So are people generally supportive of this additional language that would kind of require what's the actual, some specifics of what needs to be included in the notice itself?
Sounds good on my end so far.
Okay, I see.
I just have a quick question on notice. I'm sorry if this has already been talked about, but is it up to the agency on what the participant compensation would be? How does that process work?
So we have an additional best practice proposed below around the participant incentives and compensation.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No worries. It's kind of a placeholder, but that we have additional details at the bottom.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. That's a good question. Okay, so moving on, unless there's anything else, it looks like there's general support for that content. Now we're looking at outreach methods. I'll give people a chance to read this. This is the tools and how agencies are reaching out to communities to engage with communities. There's feedback on things that should be added or deleted or revised.
Yeah, I think it's social media. I don't know. I don't see any ads, like actually paying for ads rather than posting it on the social media platforms. I will also probably recommend phone calls or robocalls to households, outside of also one-on-ones or emails to local partner organizations. I know I believe we had a longer list on our first draft, but that was a little more detailed.
I think that's right, Ilda. There was a longer list. I think this is trying to be inclusive, so it should include, and maybe it should say, but not exclude, not limited to. Again, how to get to that, a place where the approaches are tailored to what's most effective and meaningful for that community without an agency needing to use text when the community doesn't use text, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's just expanding from it. I just feel like this recommendation is the floor, or where many of the agencies are at right now. Like they're doing a social media post. It might be sending might be in one media station or something like that, but so that's where I'm maybe more details of what are some of the examples or that should be followed for that engagement.
Right, and as Lubna shared, some of the pieces in the bike rack, that I think that longer list is in that bike rack now. So if the proposal is to bring that back, then we can do that.
I would like to bring it back, but I would like to let other task force members speak if you have any concern.
I agree. I think, yeah, it should explicitly also include, yeah, like even possibly TV and radio ads, whatever is most effective for most communities. And from my experience, although social media and other sources are becoming increasingly effective, traditional TV and radio advertisements and those kinds of things are still very effective as well.
Natalie, I just wanted to make note that this kind of updated language for this outreach method section seems like it came from the best practices focus groups. And so I wasn't sure if there was feedback that you remember off the top of your head that that led us in this direction to have it be summarized in this way.
I think part of what came out in the focus groups was just that different communities in different areas actually just use different tools and use different apps, and some WhatsApp was used by certain communities, not others, or texting, or Facebook Messenger. And so because of that diversity, I think we were looking for ways to not to be general or lower the bar, but to make sure there was a recognition that it needs to start with that community connector and then be tailored based on, what is that neighborhood using or that community using.
Yeah, I think I love that recommendation on the community connector piece. I think it's just interesting because unless there's the budget for a community connector, then all that work gets put on the nonprofit organizations or just the community being unpaid to provide that feedback to the agencies. So that's where, my feedback is to be very specific of what are all the multiple mechanisms outside of just getting feedback from community connectors, because it just continues to weigh, besides the burden that they have to live in those disproportionately impacted spaces, they have to also be the ones constantly providing those feedbacks. I think it's like a yes and, I guess.
And that gets back to the resources and that sort of cross-cutting, one of those initial capacity bullets that includes paid community connectors. Not saying that's a done deal, but I think that's trying to be addressed in multiple places, recognizing where it falls without that compensation for community connectors, Ilda.
And maybe I can, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add real quick too. I mean, I feel like this space in particular is one where it really overlaps with kind of the specificity of the need, right? I mean, it's like so many of these tactics, even social media, but particularly if we're talking about like radio and TV, right? Like can be very cost intensive And, you know, I mean, I think we all would love unlimited budgets to do all of these things, but I mean, I think that will be eventually a consideration, you know, with whatever. And so there just probably needs to be some level of discretion for the agency, or us thinking about like, okay, do we, you know, we can't necessarily do radio and TV for like all of the 1,000, you know, smaller permits that like Joel was mentioning earlier, but certainly for the big ticket items and things like that. So I think some level of that just discretion and or ability to prioritize and or just whatever we kind of need to bring into the conversation here too.
Yeah, and it's almost like outreach should not be limited, like, and not limited to, but like sort of like highlighting all the different ways of outreaching. And I don't know if Joel, if maybe tied into that upper one where we talked about the budget and necessary support, it is really highlighting, including, you know, specific amounts for advertisement and outreach mechanisms. I don't know if it is. I think it's just outreach. Yeah, budgets for outreach. Yeah, I think capacity funds should build into. There you go.
Did I get a good
project? Yeah, that sounds good. Does that capture what you were representing, Jonathan? I just want to make sure that you're feeling heard, and I see high mail, so thumbs up.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, recognizing, right, that like, you know, we definitely would love to get good budgets for all of this, and that's not always in our control. You know, and yeah, just I think my flag is like I don't want the expectation and or like requirement to be that like, you know, an agency has to do TV and radio and all of these, you know, all of these things for every single item. And it's a hard question that I don't have a perfect answer for, but how do we prioritize that? How do we kind of consider that? And certainly asking for budgets is good, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee them. So I think that's the flag. I mean, I think this largely captures it, but I mean, I think it's maybe a continued conversation.
It's like agencies' budgets and projects according to it. No, I can definitely see that. But one of my questions is, it's primarily the cost of the production, because for example, ads, etc., can be presented from the state as a PSA, correct? Like they're like it's not that the cost within the radio station is the cost of producing the content, right?
Maybe I'll answer that one as someone who does this often. And the answer is we can sometimes get public service announcements or PSAs, but not always. So, you know, we use a mix of approaches. So there is obviously the cost to us as staff, our hours of work to develop the messaging, or for example, Rosario on our team will actually record the Spanish language radio ads we do or have done. But then there's also kind of some stations do make us pay, or they say we'll do a public service announcement, but we can't guarantee that it will run, right? So we've had one that kind of didn't end up going forward too. So it, you know, we do have that option that's not available to the general public. It's not always available, and it's not kind of consistent that would always be the case.
And again, I mean, you know, I think everyone, you know, on the agency side, I'm sure for big ticket items and big decisions is more than willing to like do all of those things for those. But, you know, then again, if it's, you know, a dry cleaner that's re-upping their permit, you know, or whatever, and, you know, whatever, I mean, whatever the instance is, right, there's going to be lots of just small individual things that the question is like, do we do those for every single one of them?
Yeah, and if it's helpful, Jonathan, I put the comment in the chat that when I said we should be explicit about including radio and TV, I meant as an option, not a requirement.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just, it flags a good question, I think, here generally, but yeah.
Thanks for,
oh, I was gonna mention, I know we're past our sort of break time a little bit, and then we were gonna move into what's it called, timelines in the calendar, and then move into public comment. I know we're pretty close. Natalie, team, how would you like us to proceed? Just continue this conversation as part of the next task force meeting with the rest of the task force?
I would propose maybe we adjust the public comment to about 15 minutes to give us a little more time to get closer and work through some more of these best practices.
I hate
if the
that
task
comment.
force.
I see that we have quite a few participants. I'm curious if many folks have submitted requests to speak. Please, if you're present in a meeting and you like to have a request to speak specifically on any of the draft recommendations presented today, please, if you would like to drop, maybe we can see if it's maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I will need only for public comment.
In Gilda, sorry, we didn't do registration for this subcommittee meeting, so we don't have a pre-assigned list, but are you asking folks who would like to give public comment to put their name in the
maybe I
chat?
should have clarified. Yeah, if folks, members of the community, please, if you would you like to make a public comment, please submit your name in the chat so we can have you on stack, and probably definitely we'll have to time it today. We can see if we require 15 or 20 minutes. Maybe with that, as folks are submitting that, maybe Natalie, we can take like a 5-minute break as we wait for community members to to put that in the chat, and then maybe we can make the decision if it's like a 15 or 20-minute public comment. I just see we have more participation than usual, so I really want to encourage that and make sure that we hear from folks.
Yeah, I think if we want to take a really quick break and get a sense of the community voices so that we don't cut that short, I agree. We don't want to lose that opportunity. That would be great. So come back at 6:30, if that works for folks. Great. Thanks, everybody. think we're at a 5-minute break. Maybe folks can turn their cameras on just to see if folks have had a chance to come back to their machines. Thanks. Sorry to truncate our break. And I guess I did put a message in the chat, but for members of the public and community members, if you would like to share a public comment during our public comment, if you could please put your name in the chat so we can be sure to reserve appropriate amount of time. I don't see any names there, but if anyone else received a direct chat, please let me know.
I did not. Let's continue then with the meeting. And then I see that I think JD, you would like to be on staff for public comment. So I think maybe like we can make the executive decision. As of now, nobody has put in their name. 15 minutes sounds about right. 3 minutes per comment. So maybe we can at least get 5 folks if folks decide last minute to, or folks that we're counting on comment during their last period. Thumbs up. I see. Okay, let's keep going.
In Ilda, while we were on break, I tried to sort of clean up that discussion we just had in the document. So it's now sort of, we undid the changes we made based on the focus group input and kind of went back to the former setup of how the section looks, which is essentially saying, one, here are the methods the agencies should consider using that are not currently in the law, depending on the nature and available funding to that point. And then also that there should sort of separately be funding for agencies to work with community connectors to use sort of additional or some of the same methods. So just want to make sure I accurately captured that conversation we had earlier.
Thank you so much, Joel. Really appreciate it. Task force members, thumbs up. Do you feel good about this? I'm trying to pump you up. I know it's 6:30, but. Jaime, good? Okay, great. Elizabeth, trying to scroll through. Marsha, did that capture your concerns? Also, Jonathan, is he still on? I don't see him. He might have had to hop off. Okay. Great. Well, let's move on to methods of receiving input from communities.
So this is sort of the other direction. The first was what does outreach look like to communities? And this is how our agency is receiving input from communities. So I'll give folks a chance to take a look at what's proposed there in terms of the different locally appropriate ways that are suggested. I think if as we've done, if there are any changes, things to add, remove, or edit, maybe let's first just look at the at subpart A, starting with in an effort to receive input. And then there's 6 bullets below.
I think I feel good about it. I think the more that I look at the methods for input and kind of all the pressure, or not pressure, but I will say all the emphasis on community participation and from partner organizations to provide that input of when and where is sort of what's going to be the compensation for them. So I guess that's just a point for us later in the compensation portion of it. Like what would it be for consultation and groups, not just participants of meetings, but groups that are being consulted in the process for methods of input from community members according to the areas.
Thanks, Hilda. Any other comments or suggestions for subpart A here? Okay, so subpart B is looking at what's currently included in the EJ Act in terms of methods for receiving input. I'm not sure since that's already there, I'm not sure if folks have thoughts on the importance of keeping that language or adding to it. I think there's a recommendation to add hybrid meetings because that's not listed. Any comments on B or suggestions? Are people comfortable with keeping that language?
Outside of online comment portal, but like if it's like video recording of comments. So maybe if they're not able to participate and they would like to make a video, I don't know. That's just the only one that it might add.
Great, thanks, Hilda. Am I missing any comments? I'm not sure if I see any hands or any other comments. So I think we can go down to C, which actually proposes some other methods of receiving public comment. And some of these came out of the focus groups and some other comments that have been flagged in community engagement conversations in the last year. Any thoughts on adding to, removing, or revising these 5 suggestions? Task force
focus groups, that will be the only one that I will add.
Add focus groups to that list, Hilda. Okay, great. Thanks, Joel. Any other comments or concerns? Are people generally comfortable with how agencies collect input from communities and the language that's proposed? I think we can move on to location of meetings. I'm counting on folks to stop us if we're missing anyone. I don't want to cut off voice, but I also want to make sure we shift to public comment in 6 minutes here. So looking at location for meetings, part A is listing what's currently listed in the Environmental Justice Act. And part B is suggesting some other characteristics and accessibility components when selecting a location. And I think we have shared this in terms of our experience. We've only in the last few months started doing in-person or hybrid meetings. So our experience on actual location selection is more limited. Since for the last year, we've been doing primarily remote virtual meetings. Does the list in B look okay? I think a lot of these ideas came from task force members in previous conversations around free parking and access to public transportation, proximity to bike paths. think about the benefit the local businesses might get if there was a meeting nearby.
I don't know if we want to get into this detail, but like space for childcare.
Great, thanks, Elda.
Marcia, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and it just came to mind, previously we were talking about, whether we would have a minimum of 2 meetings or 3 meetings, whatever that number may be, whatever it is for the agency and the number of meetings they have. I think when you look at locations of meeting, consideration of diversity and location, right? Like having the meeting in the same location for all of your meetings, it could be difficult, for the community. So just providing diversity and location as a consideration when scheduling meetings.
Yes, thank you so much, Marcia. That is such a fantastic point.
I think we can go down to part C, unless there are any other comments. Thanks, Marcia. This is a recommendation, if recommended by a community connector, to create a meeting hub that might help communities and areas where reliable internet is lacking. This is something that came out of the focus groups. People generally support that the recommendation in C. I don't think I'm seeing any hands or concerns. So I think we're moving on to outreach materials. Let's look at A first. What are the sort of characteristics when creating outreach materials? And I think important to note that all the sort of sub bullets there, the 5 components, are consulting with community connectors to create an outreach plan, use accessible language, think about visibility of materials, consider language and translation, and diverse platforms to share those materials. What would folks add or change about section A and those 5 bullets, sub bullets?
I think for me will be like share meeting materials across diverse platforms as recommended on, I believe it's the methods of receiving input from communities. Sorry, no.
For outreach, community outreach.
Yeah, that one. My apologies. Methods of, yeah.
That's a great point. I think there are some interconnections that right now aren't necessarily captured because of the nature of this draft, but that's something I think we'd want to go back to and make sure those connections are made.
I don't know if it necessarily needs to be in writing, but I would just suggest keeping in mind like physical flyers and posters as part of that outreach to be put up at local businesses or libraries or wherever we can put them up.
Thanks, Jimmy. So part B, still in outreach materials, suggests that regulated entities should share the timeline and scope of their permitting process with the public.
I see that
Natalie
had her hand raised for the last one. There you go.
I'm gonna add.
Apologies, sorry, Marcia.
No, it's totally fine. I don't know how to word this, but I'm going back to my previous career years and years ago. I appreciate the use accessible language, but oftentimes, you know, you can have the intent to create documents that are, you have to make the document easily readable. Sometimes you can create material that's very difficult to process and understand. And so be very conscious of how you put that material together so that it is easily readable and processed by the community.
Thanks so much, Marcia. Apologies, I didn't see your hand.
Do you feel good with this one? Do thumbs up before moving into B? Or any concerns with B, or do we want to move forward? I'm just so close to making time, guys. We're gonna do it. Okay, Natalie, participation incentives.
So this is something that's not mentioned in the EJ Act, but it's something that we were able to begin implementing in the with gift cards starting last year. So committee members joining in a capacity outside of a paid capacity are able to request a Visa gift card for participating and sharing public comment in community meetings. But I think what we wanted to capture here were some of the other pieces that could include participation incentives. What are different things that might break down those barriers that might otherwise prevent community members from joining a meeting? And so some of these are coming from comments from the task force meeting and past sessions. Some are from the focus groups. Maybe I'll let people, maybe we'll just start with participation incentives, looking at A. First, that there should be participation incentives to compensate community members. Anything on A that people would want to edit or change? I don't see any hands. So part B kind of expands what that compensation might look like. Could be a gift card, ride share, bus passes, childcare, meals. Is there anything to that list that people would want to revise or reframe?
Hey, Natalie, it's Marcia.
Great.
Don't kill me, but I need to go back to B because I totally missed that one. The regulated entity should share. You know, this one, I sat on this one for a minute. I think with this one, there needs to be, I agree with it, but I think we need to make sure that there's understanding and training and knowledge that sometimes in that permitting process, we may give a date or an expected timeline, and that can change for various reasons, right? There may be holdups in certain areas. And so it makes me think of projects per se. So like in construction, you anticipate breaking ground in the fall of 2023, and you can have outreach engagement and things like that. But based on uncontrollable, unforeseen things that happen, that project could be delayed and pushed back. And so for the B, I agree. I think sharing a timeline is important, but there needs to be dialogue that timeline can be, you know, it can change.
Yeah.
For reasons that are unexplainable.
I'll maybe add to that and being able to provide updates as soon as those are heard from or made or changes are made from the agency. Yep, thank you, Jaime. We said the same thing.
Thanks so much, Marcia and Jaime and Ilda. So I think we can jump back to the participation incentives. So there's a list in part B, and then part C is also suggesting that community connectors can recommend additional innovative incentives. I think there were some sort of community specific ideas or that came up in the focus group. So I just wanted to not limit the list of what those incentives might look like, because there might be special things like pass to the local pool or something that would be important to community members that would be specific to a particular area. Any comments, recommendations, changes for A, B, or C under participation incentives? And I guess, yeah, Joel just highlighted the whole thing, so let's think about another suggestion that I think came up from the task force members was the idea of having free rapid COVID testing and masks available for people who attend in person. I'm not seeing any hands or comments. Hilda, are you seeing anything I'm missing?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that my comment was captured just on for B. Just wanted to add similar to like A, B, as recommended in the community outreach methods above. Any updates or changes on the one above? Sorry, on what is that?
Sorry,
I was still thinking about G. My apologies. On GB, yeah, there you go.
Great. Thanks so much, Joel.
My only comment for the participation incentives, we and maybe this is for the task force members, we want to put a minimum amount of what the incentives should be for participate, so it becomes a baseline for budgeting for agencies.
If it helps to, since we're close to the end of time and there's folks who want to give public comment out, I'll just quickly share that our current guidelines that we follow is the $20 to $30 an hour range. Sort of depends on the nature and budget for the project.
Could we add that language and maybe to be reevaluated according to inflation? Do we feel like that range is appropriate, other task force members?
Yeah, especially with the language that Joel just added there at the end.
I think if there are other comments or edits, I think I'd like to try to shift to public comment with our remaining time.
Yes, thank you so much, Natalie. Yeah, let's shift into public comment.
I think we had JD and Velma, I saw it. Is there anyone else who raised their hand?
Do we have a timer? Because I know we have probably just 3 minutes for each person.
I can give you a heads up at 3 minutes. How about that, JD? I'll start a timer.
Listo?
Go for it, JD.
Listo? Okay. Now, while I'm saying this, I'm going to ask that you guys keep in mind, Greeley was the first to actually ban fracking. And also keep in mind, the current effort with Suncor to increase pollution. And then the second thing I want to say is when I use the word Mexican, I'm using that as a third person because this is what they call us, regardless of what our nationality really is. I was born in Westwood Projects, not in the hospital, but in the projects. The same night I was born, there was a man being castrated and they kept calling him the dirty Mexican. Madre dice, she says, hey, it was so bad that I can hear him, the man screaming over the birth. She said it was really complicated. Now, the reason I bring this up is because in this context, it's equivalent to what is being done in marginalized communities today. As individuals' health and their welfare, Like even living in fear, even the air today is really bad. The same thing like that man was denied a family. So familias también aquí, you know, they're denied the right to have clean air and they're being impacted very badly. Take a look at this. Remember, keep in mind, Greeley was the first to ban fracking. Look what we ended up with there. A school that don't even want air monitoring in the school. So let's fast forward. Let's go to when we had Mayor Pena in Denver. He established what they called the Westwood Housing. They gave us this housing, this money for housing. And what they wanted to do was rehab some of the dilapidated houses in town, or like in the Westwood area. And it was set up similar to this. And just like here, how there was infiltrators and there was people who were actually part of the problem, who were part of the Westwood Housing Group, it completely turned to nothing. Somebody even came in, only wanted to have the interest. And that's what I see this group going if we're not careful. But I really believe in this environmental justice group. But the same thing that happened to Westwood Housing is going to happen here. And then when people say, you know, about negotiating and all this, now watch what's going to happen is Suncor is going to get exactly what they want because they start high and then we actually settle. What we need to do here is we actually need to demonstrate action. We need to respond to Suncor. This group needs to actually say something. I mean, también, you know, when he's talking about the water, this group needs to stand up and say, no, this is what we're doing. Just like that thing that I put in the email, you have to be strong and stand up and show these communities that you're serious. And don't be afraid of it.
You're at your 3 minutes. If you can wrap up, please.
Oh, okay. All right. I apologize.
Nope, you're good. Thank you.
No need to apologize. Thank you so much, JD, for your comments, and look forward to seeing you in our next task force meeting, where we will have all the recommendations that we're really fighting for. Next speaker, Belmont.
Find the right buttons to push. Hello, everybody, and JD, thank you again for really powerful remarks, as you always make, based both on your personal experiences and really important fundamental principles. So thank you. What I put a lot of my specific comments on particular points in the recommendations in the chat. So I'm just going to comment on a couple of basic concepts that underlie my specifics, which is that for one thing, it seems to me that the concept of best practices has to apply to all agencies and all activities, because the term implies excellence in practice and it is based on the fact, and I'm making the assumption that everyone wants to try and achieve excellence, and that's not a matter of cost or convenience. That's simply what we all strive for, and best practices as outlined need to are an attempt to codify excellence in the specific practice as it relates to our communities in this case. So my concern or my principle is based on the fact that the agencies need to hear from the communities to make their best decisions and actions, just as much as the communities need to hear from the agencies. We heard an example from Renee earlier and we hear it from JD, of information about the communities that these agencies need and will not be able to obtain anywhere else. And those agencies those communities are therefore an important resource and partner in the environmental regulatory process. Also, the environmental analyses can be an important help in determining some of the specifics. The specifics are, of course, the hard part and combine multiple factors which you're addressing here. But it's important to remember that although there may be costs and inconvenience to agencies and businesses, those entities are asking permission to irretrievably pollute the air and water of those communities. So those communities are the ones that should take priority throughout the processes. So thank you very much for the time and for the opportunity to come in.
Thank you so much, Belma. Thank you so much for your comment. And as I mentioned, these are not final recommendations. This still will be taken into the larger group for vote. So we know that we have some task force members. These are also up for change and editing as we continue to move forward. I think this drives us to the end of our meeting, folks. We are like right on time. Natalie, I know you probably need like 2 minutes to talk a little bit about the timeline for moving forward, or unless you feel like you want to wrap it up.
I think we have a hard stop. There's a question I'd like to put out to the task force subcommittee members regarding the next meeting on September 6th, and just wondering, given that where we are in the process, that we'll have a full task force meeting on August 25th. We're wondering if it makes sense to have that subcommittee meeting on best practices on the 6th of September. But I think if anyone has immediate thoughts, great, but I'm happy to follow up with an email. We are missing some of our subcommittee members this evening. Is there anything else, Lubna or Joel, we'd want to flag before we let folks go so we don't keep people over? Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ilda. Thanks so much for all task force members and members of the community and public who were able to join this meeting this evening. We really appreciate that we were able to get through and capture so much of your input on some of the specifics around the recommendations. I really think this is going to be really enormously helpful in terms of next steps.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you to our interpreters for getting through all that complex policy discussion with us as well.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz and Bea.
Thanks all. Bye.